The dense forest was alive with the hum of the early morning. The sun, still low in the sky, filtered through the tangled branches of ancient trees, casting long shadows on the ground below. A soft mist hung in the air, drifting lazily between the trunks, as though the earth itself was still waking up from a deep slumber. The forest was dense but not silent. Birds, insects, and the occasional rustle of leaves filled the stillness with sound. Yet there was something different in the air today. The usual tranquility was disturbed, as if the earth was holding its breath. Amid the thicket, a sleek golden figure moved silently, its body close to the ground. The cheetah, known in the sanctuary for its exceptional hunting skills, was on the prowl. Her coat, a blend of soft, tawny fur and dark spots, camouflaged perfectly against the tall grasses. Every step she took was measured, deliberate, her senses alert to the smallest of sounds. The huntress had learned to blend into the wilderness over the years, her keen eyes always scanning for prey, her movements fluid as a shadow. She was an expert in this forest, skilled in hunting, but today felt different. There was a sense of unease that she couldn't shake off. The air felt heavy, and every twig that snapped beneath her feet seemed louder than before. The forest, usually teeming with life, was eerily quiet, but she pressed on, driven by hunger and instinct. As she moved deeper into the heart of the forest, the cheetah paused at the edge of a clearing. Her eyes narrowed, scanning the area for movement. There, just beyond the line of bushes, she spotted her target, a small herd of gazelles grazing in the distance. The huntress's muscles tensed as she crouched lower, her body barely a ripple against the grass. The wind was in her favor. Its direction would carry her scent away from the prey. She was in position. Her focus sharpened as she calculated her approach. But then, a disturbance broke the silence. A rustle of leaves to her left caught her attention. She froze, her eyes darting to the source of the noise. There, emerging from the shadows of the underbrush, was a jackal. The creature's sleek fur was a mix of gray and brown, its eyes gleaming with a mixture of curiosity and hunger. The jackal's presence was no coincidence. It was a scavenger, always on the lookout for an opportunity to steal a meal from a larger predator. The cheetah's body tensed with a surge of irritation. She had no time for distractions. The jackal's eyes flicked toward the gazelles, and for a moment the cheetah saw a glint of recognition between them. The jackal was aware of her intentions, and more importantly, it knew that the cheetah's success was not guaranteed. The gazelles were swift, and the huntress would need every ounce of her skill to catch one. With restless moments angling for a finish launch for the jet, the jackal lingered near the edge of the clearing, as though contemplating its next move. The cheetah felt the tension build, her muscles coiling in preparation. Would the jackal challenge her? Would it try to steal the meal before she had a chance to strike? Then the wind shifted, and with it came the unmistakable scent of another predator. Larger, more dangerous. The cheetah's heart skipped a beat. A lioness, perhaps. Her senses heightened. The cheetah instinctively moved back into the shadows, her focus never wavering from the gazelles. But the jackal did not retreat. Instead, it moved with a quiet confidence, as though it knew something the cheetah did not. It was edging closer to the herd of gazelles, moving in a wide arc that would bring it behind them. The cheetah's instincts screamed at her to act, but something held her back. The jackal's movements were too deliberate, too knowing. In that moment, the cheetah understood. The jackal wasn't just scavenging. It was hunting, too, and it had no intention of letting the cheetah claim the prize. What was once a potential ally was now a rival, an opportunistic predator that would stop at nothing to steal a meal. The cheetah watched as the jackal, moving with surprising stealth, crept closer to the gazelles. The huntress's pulse quickened. She had to act, but she knew it would not be easy. The jackal was quick and clever, always on the move, and it had the advantage of numbers, if it could rally the other predators in the area. The cheetah took a slow, steady breath, keeping herself hidden as she analyzed the situation. There was no time to waste. If she wanted to secure her meal, she would have to outsmart the jackal. With a sudden burst of speed, the cheetah launched herself from her hiding place, her body slicing through the air with a fluid grace. Her eyes locked onto the gazelle she had been tracking. She was fast. Too fast for the jackal to follow, but she needed to make the kill quickly. As she sprinted, her legs pumping, she heard the distant sound of the jackal's yelps, its frustration rising as it realized the cheetah had stolen the advantage. The gazelle scattered in panic, but the cheetah's target, an older, slower female, was already struggling to keep up. The huntress's claws dug into the ground as she closed the distance, her mind calculating the perfect moment to strike. The gazelle stumbled, and in that instant, the cheetah's claws sank into its flesh, bringing it to the ground. The kill was swift, but the tension in the air did not dissipate. The cheetah stood over her prey, panting heavily. Her heart raced, but there was no time to rest. The forest had not yet released its grip on her. She could feel eyes upon her, and when she turned her head, there was the jackal, lurking at the edge of the clearing, its gaze fixed on Cheetah's prize. For a moment, the two predators locked eyes. The jackal was not deterred. It had learned the cheetah's ways, had watched and waited, and now it was preparing to strike. But the cheetah was ready. She had learned from this game, too. With a low growl, she stood tall, her sharp claws flexing, her body language unmistakable. She was the huntress, and she would not let her prize slip away. But as she prepared to defend her kill, a strange sound interrupted the standoff. It was not the low growl of another predator or the flutter of a bird taking flight. It was the sound of leaves rustling, in a rhythm too deliberate, too controlled. The cheetah's fur prickled as she turned toward the source of the noise, only to find that the forest had not been silent after all. A new player had entered the game. From the shadows, a figure emerged. A human. Tall, clad in the muted colors of the forest, moving with a quiet precision that mirrored the cheetah's own. The cheetah froze, her instincts flaring. She knew what this meant. The human was no longer a distant observer. The balance of the forest had shifted. In that moment, both the cheetah and the jackal understood. Survival was no longer just about strength or cunning. It was about adapting to the world around them. And now, in the presence of this new threat, neither of them would win this game. The cheetah's eyes lingered on the human, then back to the jackal, whose eyes flickered with uncertainty. And as the wind whispered through the trees, the forest held its breath once more. The figure of the human stood motionless, their eyes scanning the clearing with a practiced, unblinking gaze. The tension between the predators and the newcomer was palpable, the silence only broken by the faintest rustle of the leaves and the distant calls of birds. The cheetah's muscles remained coiled, ready to spring into action, yet she was hesitant. This was a new threat, something neither the jackal nor herself could predict. The jackal, sensing the change in the air, took a cautious step back. Its eyes flickered between the cheetah and the human, its decision hanging in the balance. The cheetah watched it, calculating, her own gaze shifting to the human again. She had encountered humans before, from a distance, but they had always been a part of the background noise, a far-off presence in the vast, untamed land. But this human was different. Focused, deliberate, moving with a purpose that spoke of an understanding of the wild that few creatures possessed. The cheetah's attention snapped back to her prey, still lying motionless in the center of the clearing. Her instinct screamed for her to protect it, but now there was more at stake than simply a meal. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath, as though the trees and the earth themselves were watching, waiting for the next move. The human took a slow step forward, their movements fluid, avoiding any sudden actions that might alert the cheetah or provoke the jackal. The cheetah shifted, the soft crunch of her claws pressing into the ground audible in the stillness. She narrowed her eyes. The human scent was unfamiliar, but there was something else. A mixture of earth, leather, and something primal. Something that reminded her of the wild. There was no fear in the human's posture, no hesitance. Just a quiet understanding of the delicate balance of nature. Then, without warning, the jackal lunged, its eyes locked on the cheetah's kill, its sharp teeth bared in a snarl. The cheetah's reflexes kicked in immediately, her body leaping forward with a burst of speed that only she possessed. The jackal, startled by her sudden movement, hesitated for just a moment. Enough for the cheetah to close the distance. With a swift strike, the cheetah's claws dug into the jackal's back, knocking it off balance. The jackal yelped, a sharp, high-pitched sound that seemed to echo through the trees. It scrambled backward, eyes wide with both surprise and fury. The cheetah's body language was unyielding, her muscles taut and ready to pounce again if necessary. The message was clear: this meal is mine. But even as the jackal backed away, there was no retreat. It was not just hunger that fueled the jackal. It was cunning. The jackal darted to the side, its movements quick and calculated, as if it was waiting for an opening, an opportunity to strike once more. The cheetah, her back still arched in a defensive posture, kept her eyes locked on the jackal, her entire body poised and ready. The human had been watching all of this unfold, remaining still, almost invisible in the undergrowth. It wasn't until the jackal made another move, this time coming around the back of the cheetah, that the human acted. With a sharp, sudden motion, the human raised their hand, their fingers extended in a gesture that seemed to carry both authority and The jackal froze, its ears flicking, its body tense. For a moment, the wild predator seemed to reconsider its next move, as if it could sense something it didn't fully understand. The cheetah, too, paused, her instincts sharpening. She had learned to read every shift in the air, every nuance of movement. The human's presence had shifted the balance once again, turning what had been a standoff between her and the jackal into something more complicated. Then, in a motion as quick as the cheetah herself, the human crouched low to the ground, their eyes never leaving the jackal. The jackal, sensing the change, hesitated for only a fraction of a second before it turned tail and fled into the underbrush, its tail tucked low and ears flattened in defeat. The cheetah stood over her prey, still cautious, her breathing slow and steady. The human's presence was no longer an immediate threat. The jackal was gone, but the uncertainty lingered in the cheetah's gaze. Her instincts told her to be alert. There were other dangers in this forest. The human didn't move immediately. They watched the cheetah for a moment longer, their gaze soft but intense, as if acknowledging the predator's victory. Then, with a slow, deliberate step, the human turned and began to make their way out of the clearing, their figure disappearing into the shadows of the trees. They left the cheetah in peace, her kill secure. For now, the cheetah, after a long moment of stillness, finally stepped forward. She lowered her head to her prey, her sharp teeth sinking into the flesh with precision. She could feel the strength of the gazelle's body, the warm blood rising to meet her tongue. It was a reward for her skills, her patience. But her senses remained alert. The human's presence in the forest had added a layer of unpredictability. The game had changed, and the cheetah knew it. As she fed, the silence of the forest seemed to settle again, the tension of the moment fading like mist in the morning light. But the cheetah understood something now. Nothing in the wild was ever guaranteed. Every moment was a lesson, a challenge, a game of survival that required more than just strength. It required adaptability, awareness, and sometimes even respect for the presence of others in the delicate balance of the forest. With one last glance toward where the human had disappeared, the cheetah returned her attention to her meal. She would finish it quickly, before the next unexpected turn of fate could arrive. But even as she fed, her sharp eyes kept scanning the forest around her, her instincts primed. She knew that the forest was never truly still. The game of survival was ever-changing, and she, the huntress, had to be ready for whatever came next. As the cheetah tore into her meal, each pull of flesh from bone was a calculated act, one she had perfected over the years. The warm, red blood still pulsed through the gazelle's body, and she could feel its life fading with each rip of her jaws. Yet, the instinctive wariness within her remained undiminished. The forest around her was deceptively calm, but she knew better than to let down her guard completely. The winds had shifted slightly, rustling the leaves above her head and carrying the faint scent of something unfamiliar. For a moment, the cheetah paused, her sharp eyes narrowing as she listened. Her ears swiveled, picking up the faintest sounds. The distant call of a bird, the creak of branches swaying in the wind, the soft crunch of leaves underfoot. And then, unmistakably, the low, warning growl of a predator. The cheetah's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't the jackal this time. The sound was deeper, more deliberate, a growl that sent a ripple of tension through her muscles. A lion. She had heard these sounds before, knew them well. There were few animals in the wild that could challenge her speed or stealth, but a lion, especially a lioness, was a different kind of threat. She stood motionless, her body rigid, eyes darting to the shadows of the trees. She could sense the lion's presence now, closer than before, the growl shifting into a low, deep rumble as it approached. Her instincts screamed at her to run, to vanish into the tall grass, but the cheetah knew that flight was not always an option. Lions were slow, but their strength and coordination made them formidable opponents. If she was spotted now, the chances of escape were slim. The cheetah looked down at her prey, the gazelle's warm body still lying before her. Her sharp claws gripped the earth beneath her. Every moment felt like an eternity. Her cubs, hidden a few paces away in the thicket, were her first concern. She had to protect them above all else. Her ears flicked again, and this time the growl was unmistakable. The lioness was close. She could hear the soft scrape of claws on the forest floor, the rhythm of the lioness's padded steps barely audible in the thick air. The cheetah's mind raced. She couldn't fight the lioness, she wouldn't win. But she could outsmart her. She could use the environment, the dense foliage, the cover of shadows, to her advantage. Her spotted coat, perfectly designed to blend with the grasslands, would work here as well. She could disappear into the shadows, just as she had in the open savanna. But there was one more danger she hadn't considered. The human. The one who had watched her from the edge of the clearing. The cheetah's eyes flicked to the spot where the human had disappeared into the trees, but there was no sign of them now. Had the human moved closer? Would they intervene? Could the human pose a threat, or would they be the one thing that could keep the lioness at bay? The lioness's growl grew louder, and the cheetah made her decision. With a low, fluid movement, she turned away from her kill, her claws barely leaving the ground. She melted into the foliage, the shadows swallowing her as she moved with practiced silence. Her movements were precise, every step deliberate, every breath calculated. Her heart beat faster, adrenaline surging through her veins as she neared the thicket where her cubs were hiding. She couldn't let the lioness get close, not to them. The cubs, still learning the ways of the wild, couldn't possibly comprehend the danger they were in. They trusted her for protection, and she would not fail them. The cheetah stopped just short of the thicket, crouching low and listening. Her ears flattened as she heard the lioness pause, sniffing the air. The cheetah's breath caught in her throat. She had been spotted. The lioness, towering and fierce, emerged from the shadows, her golden eyes scanning the clearing. The cheetah's body tensed. A split second later, the lioness's eyes locked onto her prey, the gazelle. Still lying vulnerable in the clearing, the lioness's muscles coiled as she prepared to move in for the kill. But then something unexpected happened.